In this video, I'm going to talk about the top 10 states where home prices are surging the most in 2024. Because you guys out there as buyers and investors, you need to understand if prices are continuing to go up in your area and defy the odds. Even with higher mortgage rates, everyone, we're seeing these prices continue to go up in certain parts of America. Really, it's about half of the states in the US right now that are driving home prices higher, starting with our number 10 state with the fastest appreciating home prices right now. Values in this state have gone up 6.3% over the last year, according to data from Zillow. Where are we talking about? That would be New York. Home prices in New York State continue to rise despite 7% mortgage rates and despite the fact that many people have left New York over the last couple years. With New York losing 143,000 people in 2023, you can see that this was one of New York's biggest migration losses in terms of population over the last 30 years, although it was an improvement over the losses in 2021 and 2022 during the pandemic. Now, you guys might be saying, well, wait a minute, if New York is losing so many people, how is it that home prices are continuing to go up? Well, the answer to that question has everything to do with low inventory. With the inventory of homes for sale on the New York housing market still resting about 30% below the long-term average. So even though lots of people are leaving New York, it's not enough people to put no more new listings on the market, with this low inventory causing home prices in New York to continue to go up. The source of frustration for many of you home buyers out there in New York, as well as our number 9 state, where home prices are still surging in 2024. And I gotta say, folks, this state really surprised me. Like, I thought by now home prices would really be crashing here, but no, so far they've continued to go up, appreciating by 6.3% over the last year in California. With the typical value of a house in California increasing from $736,000 in March 2023 to $783,000 in March 2024, making California the most expensive state to buy a house in America, with California's typical home value almost 20% higher than DC and Massachusetts at number 2 and 3. And I think the fundamental issue that keeps pushing prices higher in California is a lack of home building, with California as a state only pulling 109,000 building permits over the last 12 months. You can see that this building permit number is actually lower than it was a couple years ago before the housing boom, and is half of what the peak was in 05-06 at the peak of the last bubble before the big crash. And so California is just not building very much. And there's a variety of reasons for that. You know, there's not a lot of room to build in a place like San Diego. There's also restrictive zoning laws in California. And additionally, home builders and developers, they don't really want to go to California because it's an unfriendly business environment to build. There's lots of permit fees, there's lots of impact fees, there's heavy environmental regulation, and thus all of those things are pushing down new construction and withholding inventory from the market, which is causing prices to continue to rise despite the huge lack of affordability. First, let's talk about our number 8 housing market, where prices are continuing to rise in 2024. This one, I think, is shocking to a lot of people. Because if I told you, hey folks, this housing market appreciated by 7% over the last year and is beating places like Florida and Texas, you'd say no way. However, home prices in Illinois spiked by 7% over the last year, from 240,000 up to 257,000. And like New York, Illinois is a state where lots of people are leaving. Like, Illinois is hemorrhaging people every single year, especially since the pandemic, and actually going back the last 3 decades, where you can see literally Illinois has lost population every year due to migration going back to 1991. And this population loss got especially severe in 2022 when 110,000 people left the state. And then in 2023, it improved. Only 43,000 people left the state, which is not as many, but still is a pretty heavy loss compared to most other areas. And so again, we have this situation where people are fleeing Illinois, maybe because the weather is cold and the taxes are high and they want to go someplace warmer and more business friendly, yet the housing market keeps going up. Particularly everyone in the suburbs around Chicago. We're looking at the Chicago metro here, and you can see actually if we zoom in, prices are going down in the center of Chicago, on the south side of Chicago, but then boy, are they going up on the western side and some of these wealthy suburbs to the west, as well as some of these suburbs up to the north, prices going up as much as 13% year over year. And the reason that these prices in Chicago and Illinois more broadly are going up is, again, a lack of inventory. There is a legitimate shortage of homes for sale in Illinois right now, with the state only having 14,800 homes on the market in active listings. That's down about 50% from the long-term norms, and it continues to go down. There's been no bounce back in inventory in Illinois since the Fed hiked interest rates 2 years ago, and so long as this inventory stays here, prices will keep going up. And one thing I'm seeing out there in the housing market, everyone, as I read these news articles talking about home prices continuing to go up, is I think what a lot of prognosticators are doing is they're looking at the broader appreciation in the US, which is being driven by the states on this list, and thinking that this is some type of signal of what every market in America is experiencing. And it's very important for you guys to remember that that's not the case, right? So while these states are seeing higher home prices, and sometimes by a lot, there's other states and other cities in America where home prices are going down, particularly in some of those Sunbelt boom towns right now, in states like Florida and Texas. So if you live in Florida and Texas, it's a different ballgame. Like in Texas, prices only rose 0.5% over the last year. So in Texas, the home value growth has really flatlined and is soon going to be in negative territory across the state. In fact, it's already well into negative territory in Killeen and Austin and San Antonio and a bunch of places near the border. And so this speaks to how important it is for you as a home buyer to do the research on what's happening in your state, city, and zip code. You have to do that so you can make a more informed decision, because you do not want to buy a house in this housing market in 2024, whether it's for $300,000 or $600,000 or $1 million. You do not want to make the biggest financial decision in your life without truly understanding the trends. And what I would suggest you guys do is go to www.reventure.app and just search your city or zip code and start digging into those inventory figures in your area. But now, folks, our number 7 state where home prices are going up right now is another really interesting one. It's in the Midwest. It's actually Ohio, where prices in Ohio are up 7.1% over the last year and are up especially in Cleveland, Toledo, and the areas in and around Columbus. And I gotta say, everyone, I'm actually kind of getting a little bullish on Ohio. Like, I'm not ready to say you should buy in Ohio because I still think prices are too high compared to what they were before. But we're actually starting to see some really positive demographic trends in the state of Ohio. Namely, we're starting to see people move in, with the migration total in the state of Ohio surging to a record in back-to-back years. So in 2022, we had 15,000 net people move to Ohio. In 2023, we had 29,000 net people move to Ohio. This was the 2 best years for inbound migration into Ohio, going all the way back to 1991. So you can see for most of the last 30 years, Ohio lost people. Well, now we're on the positive side of the ledger. Ohio is adding people. And the reason Ohio is adding people is because it's cheaper and more affordable than most other parts of America. So you as a home buyer, you can go into the Ohio market if you're coming from Illinois or if you're coming from New York, and you will find cheaper homes than where you're coming from. And I think that is driving a lot of the growth. As you can see, the typical home value in the state of Ohio is still only $223,000, making it the 8th cheapest housing market in America. Like if you go to Cincinnati, you could buy a 4-bed, 2-bath house, 2,000 square feet. It looks pretty nice on the inside, everyone. Pretty classic house with actually a newly renovated kitchen. You can get a house like that for $260,000 with a monthly payment of $1,800 a month. A price point and payment which might look high to local residents from Ohio, but is significantly cheaper than where a lot of people are coming from. And ultimately, I think affordability is going to rule the day in the 2024 housing market and beyond. The states and the cities that are truly still affordable, like where prices are well below the national median, I think they're going to continue to outperform because people in those cities and states, they can still qualify for mortgages, and the people coming into those cities and states still feel like it's a good deal. However, I'm a bit more skeptical of our number 6 housing market where home prices continue to appreciate. This is one where values have kind of surged out of control over the last 3 or 4 years, and I don't necessarily think the fundamentals are there to justify it in Maine. Because in Maine, home prices are up 8.3% over the last year, with a typical value going from just like 190,000 7 years ago to 392,000 today. So values in Maine have doubled over the last 6 to 7 years, and making Maine like no longer an affordable market Particularly in Portland, everyone. Portland, Maine, a typical value of a house is now over 500 grand, which for perspective, that's more than Nashville, Austin, and Phoenix. So does Portland, Maine deserve to be more highly priced than Nashville, Austin, and Phoenix? Well, I don't really think so, everyone. Portland to me is more of like a vacation bedroom market that gets lots of people from Boston and maybe even New York who want a weekend home up there. You can see actually 20% of the homes in Maine are what's called shadow inventory. They're absentee owned unit. The people only live in on a part-time basis. So there's actually lots of vacant shadow inventory in Maine. The shadow inventory levels there are actually the highest in America. Now, folks, are you ready for the rest of this list? The top 5 states where home prices are continuing to surge in 2024. I think a bunch of these states are really going to surprise you in terms of how much prices are going up. Particularly if you live in our number 5 area where prices are still appreciating, values have gone up 8.3% here over the last year. Where would I be talking about? That's Rhode Island. Rhode Island is situated in the northeast US between Massachusetts and Connecticut. And you can see the price appreciation is actually starting to re-accelerate in Rhode Island. It went down to 4.9% a year ago. Now it's up to 8.5%. And Rhode Island is basically getting invaded right now in terms of its housing market by people coming down from Massachusetts. This is essentially like what drives Rhode Island's housing market. There's not a ton of local demand there, but there's lots of people from Boston that come down and buy a house and commute back into the city in Boston, or maybe they work remote and can live in Rhode Island full time. Well, they go to Providence, and they come to Providence because prices, even though they've gone up here in Providence, are still about 30% cheaper than Boston. Now, one thing I ask myself is, are these states and cities that are relying on continued inbound migration, are these states and cities going to keep that up? Especially kind of this pandemic driven migration out of the big cities like Boston, New York, and DC into the surrounding suburbs and areas. Clearly, that's still happening to a certain extent, but I do wonder if at some point it's going to slow down. Like, how many people are there in Boston and New York and Washington, D.C. that are just willing to move an hour away to buy a house in a neighboring state or county? I think at some point we're going to see a reduction in that inbound migration. And when that happens is when some of these housing markets might begin to slow. But one market that is showing absolutely no signs of slowing right now is our number 4 state where prices continue to rise. In this area, values are up 8.6% over the last year due to a complete collapse in inventory. As you can see in New Hampshire, our number 4 state where prices are going up, the inventory on the market is only 1,400 homes, which is up slightly from its low 2 years ago, but is still about 50% below the long-term average, which suggests that prices will continue to go up according to the Reventure App home price forecast score. It ranks New Hampshire as a 61 out of 100, with one of the big reasons being this inventory shortage. You can see next to New Hampshire, everyone, is another state with a big inventory shortage, Massachusetts, which is actually our number 3 housing market where prices are growing the fastest. You can see in Massachusetts, prices are up a hefty 8.7% year over year, making 2024 the 3rd best appreciation year for Massachusetts, going all the way back to 2004, 2005. And so we're seeing levels of price growth here across Mass that we have not seen outside of the pandemic in decades. This price growth is especially hefty in Boston as well as Worcester, where prices are up 9.7% over the last year. And Massachusetts is another state like California, which suffers from an acute shortage of housing due to a lack of building. The building permits in Massachusetts, they don't really get pulled. They don't really happen. The builders and the developers, they're not active there because despite the fact that there's actually lots of land in Massachusetts, like as soon as you get about 30 minutes outside of Boston, you see, there's lots of land. The builders don't really build there because the local zoning and the local regulations makes it very difficult to build. With the building permit rate in Massachusetts ranking as the 8th lowest in America at 0.2%, which calculates building permits divided by population, you can see that in a state like Idaho, North Carolina, Florida, or South Dakota, they build roughly 4 times as much on a relative basis than Massachusetts. And so when those building levels are so low, it's going to be hard for inventory to increase. I mean, what it's going to actually take for inventory to go up in Massachusetts or California or some of the other states on this list is a recession. Like, that's the one thing that really at this point would release more inventory onto the market, is we see some type of recession occur, not just kind of the tangential downturns we've seen in certain industries so far like tech, but an actual recession where the unemployment rate doubles, and the mortgage defaults spike. That's unfortunately what it's going to take at this point in some of these states to release and unlock the inventory and new listings needed to bring prices down. Especially in our top two states where home prices are continuing to go up, everyone. These two states are kind of a cut above all the other states on this list in terms of their appreciation. And I think a lot of people are like scratching their head about how these states could be the two hottest housing markets in America right now. Starting with number 2, New Jersey, where prices are up 9.4% over the last year. This surge in appreciation has pushed the typical value of a house in New Jersey up to $512,000, making New Jersey the 7th most expensive state to buy a house in nominal terms, and even higher than that when you consider your house payment inclusive of property taxes. Undoubtedly, New Jersey is getting overrun right now by a lot of people leaving New York City. The exodus from New York City in terms of wealthy homeowners and homebuyers, that is continuing into 2024, which is something that's continuing to suppress inventory on the New Jersey housing market. With the number of homes for sale in New Jersey down to 11,500 in March 2024, which is down 75% from its levels 5 years ago. And probably the number one comment I think I get in the comment section when I do my more like housing crash related videos and talk about the cities where prices are dropping is people from New Jersey. I see you guys in the comment section all the time, and you say, not in New Jersey. That's not happening in New Jersey. I'm still seeing bidding wars in New Jersey, and yeah, you guys are right. The data totally backs up what you're saying. We're going to have to see more listings and inventory in New Jersey before prices will soften. And a similar case in our number 1 housing market where prices are continuing to go up. This state has registered a massive 11.4% appreciation rate over the last year. It's the only state to be in double digits on appreciation, which is a miraculous achievement given that mortgage rates are over 7%, which is making Connecticut the hottest housing market in America today. And what I would suggest you guys do if you're a home buyer and investor trying to make sense of this housing market and trying to understand where home prices are going to head in the future is go to www.reventure.app right now and just search your city or zip code. Start digging into those inventory figures in your area so you can understand whether there's a shortage of homes for sale or whether there's a surplus, because that's going to really help influence where prices head in the future. And really to get to the next level on that analysis, you're going to want to look at the data point inventory surplus or deficit, which gives you a color-coded view where there's lots of sellers and a bigger likelihood of prices dropping versus where there's more of a shortage and a bigger likelihood of prices increasing. Understanding that knowledge is going to really help you as a buyer. And to access it, sign up for a monthly pass on Reventure App for $39 a month. It's going to get you access to over 30 premium data points on the housing market, including that inventory surplus deficit metric, as well as the Reventure home price forecast score for every zip code in America, so you can see in one metric whether it's more likely that prices go up or go down. So empower yourself as a home buyer investor so you can make a more informed decision. Buying a house, it's the biggest financial commitment of your life. You don't want to do that without understanding the trends in the market so you can make a better, more informed decision.